and welcome to my channel. My name is Rosica and this is the Midnight Reader. And today we are going to be doing my March wrap-up. I read 7 books in March, and I do apologize if the energy is a little bit low today. I'm ill. Fun fact about moving, it's very stressful and it gave me shingles. I am in pain, I am tired, I have body aches and chills, and it's a great time to be me. I was waiting to feel a little bit better to film this, but I just don't think it's gonna happen, so we're just gonna do this today. Yep, because not every day is a good day. You can see we're in a new location today. This is my bookshelves in progress. This area over here is actually gonna have some furniture, and it's gonna be my little reading nook, and I could have set that up, but I don't feel well today, and I don't want to walk to the car and pull the shit out of the car. So guess what? We're going to reveal the reading nook a little bit later. This will be my TBR shelf, which is why it's kind of blank, and then the bookshelves extend up that way. So I read 7 books in March. 2 were actually from the TBR swap I did with Jay from my quarter life crisis, which means that I have finished a TBR. It has happened. I read all the books Jay assigned to me. This is very unlike me. I usually do not do well with book assignments, so perhaps it's like the end of times? Possible. The 2 books I read from Jay were A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab and The Power by Naomi Alderman. And I really would like to talk about them, but I can't. The video really is coming. Jay and I had some scheduling stuff we had to get to align to make the video the way we want to make it. It really is happening. We're going to be doing our wrap up later this month, and I guess you're just gonna have to Hamilton jokes. But it'll be a really good video. We're trying to figure out a way to work in the dozens of voice memos that we sent each other yelling about the books that we were reading. It's called delayed gratification, guys. Like, Catholics, we love this shit. We made a whole festival about it and we called it Lent. So in the meantime, I figured we could talk about the other 5 books that I finished. I did try to separate them by categories. I finished 2 books about running, which were actually on my running TBR, which means that I finished a second TBR, actually. Maybe it really is the end of times, because I finished 2 TBRs. This is very unlike me. The thing I found the most interesting about it is that, while I thought the common denominator for these books was being books about running, the actual common denominator was being books about mental health and depression. First up, Bravey by Alexi Pappas. And I actually have a physical book to show you. What is happening? This is the memoir of Alexi Pappas. She's an Olympic runner. She is a writer, filmmaker, producer, and actress. 2 of the films you might know her from would be Tracktown and Olympic Dreams, the latter being kind of famous for being shot completely on location in the Olympic Village. It's a lovely memoir. She opens every section with like a little poem, because she does write poetry as well. The title Bravey actually comes from one of her poems. This one is my favorite. I admire pickles because there's no one moment that makes a pickle a pickle. It is a thing that happens over time. Pickles are patient. That's my favorite. And then my second favorite is, if an oyster can turn sand into pearls, I can turn myself into anything. Reading Bravey, you know, kind of right off the bat that this is not your typical sports memoir. Her opening chapter talks extensively about the fact that her mother was institutionalized for most of her childhood, which unfortunately culminated in her committing suicide when Alexi was very young, and kind of leaving Alexi with this lifelong craving for female inspiration. Alexi is like painfully honest about her life, her work, her career in both running and film. She talks about her own struggles with depression. After achieving her dream of competing in the Olympics, she suffered a major depressive episode, which culminated in her own suicidal thoughts. Her memoir is unflinching in its honesty. While reading it, I sort of got the sense that she was using the writing of her story as a way to process her own life and ways she could use her story to lift up other young women, inspire them, and keep them from making similar mistakes. It is still an athletic sports memoir, and I am a runner, so I of course enjoyed her sections on running. One of my favorites was her talking about the rule of thirds, which said in either training or racing, you should obey the rule of thirds, which is 1/3 of the time you should feel great, 1/3 of the time you should feel just okay, and the last third of the time you should feel crappy as hell. If you're spending more than 1/3 of the time in any of those categories, your race or training is unbalanced. And I really appreciated that, because sometimes that's a hard thing to explain to people when they're learning to race, is that you're not going to feel good most of the time, but you also shouldn't be feeling like complete crap all of the time either. While I really enjoyed Bravey, I did wind up rating it 4 stars instead of 5. Rating memoirs is a little difficult, as I've said before, because you're rating someone's life story, which is kind of not great. So I just rate memoirs based on my personal enjoyment of the read. So I rated it 4 stars because I think this book would have resonated more with the me of 10 years ago when I was feeling a little bit more lost in my life. It doesn't resonate as much with me now because I feel pretty secure and settled in who I am as a person. And this is very much a book of someone who is still figuring out their shit. And I would definitely recommend it to any young ladies in the 15 to 25-year-old range, if you like sports memoirs. The second running book I finished was Running with Sherman by Christopher McDougall. Chris McDougall is well known for writing Born to Run, as well as a variety of other books, but Born to Run is the one he's the most famous for. It kicked off the barefoot running craze. He's an extremely persuasive and charismatic writer. Running with Sherman is the story of how Chris McDougall, who lives deep in the heart of Amish country, for his daughter's 9th birthday, he asked her what she wanted, and she replied, a donkey, because that's what happens when you live deep in the heart of farm country. Kids want donkeys. And it just so happened at the time he had a friend who was trying to acquire a donkey from a hoarder. The donkey was extremely sick and very poorly taken care of. Eventually, the friend did convince the hoarder to release the donkey to his care, and he gave the donkey to Chris in hopes that they could save his life. That donkey was named Sherman. This is a picture of him. I don't know if you can see, but his hooves look like clown shoes. Donkeys' hooves are not supposed to look like that. And if donkeys can't walk, they die, because walking is what helps them digest food. So Sherman couldn't walk because his hooves were so crappy. He had been locked in like this tiny stall in the dark for his entire life. He was completely untrusting of humans, and he was dying. Chris called in every favor he had, and they slowly but surely nursed Sherman back to health. The friend and neighbor who helped Chris save Sherman said, you know, you can't just tie him with a bell on his neck and say, go ahead and have fun in a field. He needs a purpose. You have to give him a purpose to want to be alive. Chris was trying to think of a purpose he could have for a donkey, and then thought, well, what if he was my running buddy? What if I took him running with me? And thus Running with Sherman was born. It's a lovely, lovely book. It's very much about the healing power that animals and people can have on each other. Eventually, they kind of realize that Sherman needs more donkey friends to be comfortable running. So one of their neighbors lends them 2 donkeys called Matilda and Flower. Flower is huge, by the way, like giant donkey. Chris McDougall's wife gets pulled in to run with Matilda. The neighbor who loaned the 2 additional donkeys is running with Flower until she has some personal things in her life that cause her to not be able to run. So they need a 3rd runner. Coincidentally, at the time, there was a old family friend of the McDougalls who was home from college, is sort of involuntarily, because he had just had a complete depressive episode in college, which culminated in his own failed suicide attempts. And that kid's name was Zeke. He was trying to find a purpose for being alive as well. So Chris is the tallest of the bunch, and he's kind of the only one who could run with Flower. So Sherman goes with Zeke. And it's the most adorable story of a very stubborn kid and a very stubborn donkey who figure out how to heal each other. And it's It's just lovely. They have an end goal where they want to compete in the World Burrow Championships together as a team. It's a delight. I would highly recommend this book. I also read this on audiobook. The narration was by Chris McDougall and it was fantastic. This was a solid 5-star read. And I'll lay on the floor for a minute. We're doing very medium over here. 3 more books, then I'm taking my ass right back to bed. The next 2 books I read were for middle grade March. I was invited to participate in that, and the book I chose for the prompt for middle grade March was a book that was published before I was born, and that was Redwall by Jacques. I did talk about this book in a previous vlog, and I am going to link that above. It is a medieval children's middle grade fantasy story. All the characters are woodland creatures like squirrels and mice and badgers. It is just chef's kiss, pure fantasy nostalgia. I read them growing up and they still hold up. They're still just a great and wonderful series. So I read through Redwall a lot faster than I thought I was going to. It was my unpacking book during the move. So I finished it halfway through my moving and unpacking experience, so I decided to pick up a second book from the Redwall series, which was book number 4, that is Mariel of Redwall by Jacques. Mariel is a mouse. She is a bellmaker's daughter. She and her father are at sea when their ship is set upon by McDougall, the king of the sea rats, who are pirates. I'm not gonna lie, I did picture Pirates of the Caribbean a lot while I was reading this book, and I did try to make a lot of characters into characters from Pirates of the Caribbean. The story begins with Mariel's father being imprisoned, and Mariel is thrown overboard by McDougall. She's weighted down by a rope and some rocks. Miraculously, she does survive, initially not with her memory intact, so she washes up on the beach and she's being attacked by gulls. She knots the rope that was meant to kill her into a big old knot at the end of it, starts swinging it around, and she names it Gull Whacker because she whacks some gulls with it. She's kind of a badass, definitely a tomboy, hates baths. She is eventually healed and comforted by the good creatures of Redwall Abbey, and when she regains her memory, she swears revenge on McDougall. In the meantime, there's a lot of mutinying happening within the pirate sea rat ranks. There's a splintering of factions, and some of those factions leave McDougall's hideaway and they go and attack Redwall. Because of course they do. I did only rate Mariel 4 stars because I connected with the characters a little bit less in this one, so I just found the story a little bit less compelling than the first Redwall book. However, there is a hare called Rosie, whose main character qualities is that she laughs all the time, and she has a really annoying laugh. And can I just say, I felt personally attacked by Jacques. So thanks for that. It is a fantastic middle grade read, and there were definitely parts of it that made me catch emotions in my eyes. And lastly, I finished my buddy read with Becky from Teacup the Storyteller, where we read The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffen. So this was my first buddy read, and it was so fun. At the time, she made a video of a bunch of books that she was looking for buddies to read with, and her channel was way bigger than mine, and her videos are impeccably edited, and I, was very intimidated, and I just decided to put a comment on her page saying that I would be interested in reading a book about witches, because bitches love witches. Sometimes you gotta volunteer yourself for rejection if you want acceptance. And lo and behold, she said yes. Sort of funny story. This was not the book that I volunteered to read with her. I think originally we had picked A Secret History of Witches, and somewhere along the way, I started reading A Secret History of Witches, and she started reading The Nature of Witches, which we realized sort of after we had each read 5 chapters of 2 different books. It was actually super chill and pretty funny, and I'm really very happy we wound up reading this one instead, because the other book, A Secret History of Witches, really is about kind of magic leaving a world. It's like, it covers like 5 generations of a family where magic is sort of waning from the family, and they're kind of the last witches, and every generation has less and less magic. So it's kind of slow, at least from the 5 chapters that I read. This book is not like that. The Nature of Witches is just bursting with magic. I loved the world that she built which is basically our world with our technology. The characters have cell phones, they text each other. Climate change is sort of the big bad in the book. In this world, witches have helped control the climate, and then non-magical people have overused the resources, and we've caused all this catastrophic climate change. And it's causing witches to overextend themselves to try to stop these colossal changes in weather. And although witches are seasonal, so you have like spring witches, summer witches, the autumn witches, and the winters. And their power to do things is really tied in the season, and they have very little capacity to do anything outside of their season, apart from ever witches. And ever witches are tied to all seasons, so they can use all 4 seasons of magic in each season. But it appears that that sort of power comes with a cost, which is sometimes the power just sort of escapes from ever witches, and it seeks out people who you have deep connections with, and it kills them because it's kind of uncontrollable magic. So our main story follows Clara, who's an Everwitch. Her magic has killed both her best friend and her parents. She's sort of coping with this by completely isolating herself and pushing everyone away in her life, until she meets Sang, who's a very, very cute botany boy. Man, he was written well to be attractive to me. They start training together, she eventually falls for him, and then the story is basically how does she save people while still not having to sacrifice the people in her life that she loves. I gave this 3 stars, and 3 stars for me are usually kind of like averagey reads. But it really, I just loved the world. I loved the world. It was such an easy book to sort of sink my teeth into. It was so easy to read. It was so easy to pick up and put down. I loved reading with Becky. I think she went up kind of on the same page that I did. It was just the characters, they didn't have a lot of character development. The main character, instead of having a character arc, she just kind of did like a squiggle. Like she kept having the same problem, half fixing it, same problem, half fixing it, same problem, half fixing it. There were also some things that were just sort of completely unrealistic. Like she's supposed to be kind of high school aged at like a magical witch school, and she like punches a teacher in the face, like fully like decks them in front of like the entire auditorium, and there's no repercussions for that. They were like, well, he kind of deserved it. And you're like, no. You should at least be like suspended. There was also some like plotting in it that just felt too convenient. While I got everything that I think I wanted on paper from the ending, it was just completely unsatisfying because there was no work to get there. So it didn't feel like particularly earned. Honestly, I really enjoyed reading the book though. It was such an easy read. And Becky made the point that this is a debut novel for Rachel Griffen, and she is writing another book later this year. And as a debut novel, it's excellent. Like, she really knows how to weave a world that's compelling. So I think that if she just keeps working on her plotting and character development, like, the books are just going to keep getting better. So I'm interested to read the second book when that one is published. But it was still just a 3-star read for me. Like, it was just thoroughly okay. If I could have just kicked all the characters out of the world and just read about the world, I think I would have been happier. Alright, we've made it to the end of the video, and I need to lay down again because I feel awful. I feel awful. And the bed is calling to me, ladies and germs. This was the Low Energy March wrap up. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, I'm gonna go sleep now. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'm going back to bed. Bye.